if we only think of transition as scary or hard or uncertain, then we're probably going to hold ourselves back from experiencing it or really stepping forward into it. But if we can think of that as, wow, and this is a gift, this is an opportunity, this is where I get to plug in my creativity, or I get to pay attention to my intuition, this is where I might experience joy or peace. So I think one of the things that helps people step into transition is, even if there's this much recognition of a small recognition of like, yeah, this actually could be really good. You know, like there's probably something here for me, over the inner critic that we have of, well, I'm not ready for this.
Welcome to another edition of Chasing the Timeless. This time I have one of the neatest people I've ever met, Poppy Potter, and she has no idea why I've asked her to be on the show, but I think you guys will quickly realize.
Well, I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to see you again, Andrew. And yeah, I am excited to kind of hear what questions you have and where your thought is on this. So
feel free to ask me questions. This is just a discussion, but I feel like just as I was starting to go into work with Outward Bound, I was going through a period of depression and anxiety in my life, tied to so many complex stuff. And I thought to myself, when was I the happiest in my life? By the way, I know Poppy Potter. She used to work at Outward Bound, which is a organization that takes people on wilderness trips, but it's really about building the person.
Correct, yeah.
And I thought back to when I was in college, and I did a Outward Bound trip one winter and got some college credit for writing about sled dogs and their relationship with humans. And it was 60 below zero without any wind chill. And yet I was still the happiest during that time. And so I thought, I need to seek Outward Bound out. And I'd been up to the Boundary Waters a lot since then, canoeing and camping. And I'd taken my younger son up there and actually used some of Outward Bound's little pull-along sleds. Because it's just, once you're with Outward Bound, it's a family, and I love that about it. And I thought, oh, I can become an instructor. And somebody goes, well, it's not just knowing wilderness stuff. You know, we've got people that have been to the North Pole and other stuff, and you have to go to this orientation. Is it 3 weeks?
Yeah, about that. Kind of depends on where you are in the process, but yeah, it's at least 3 weeks.
Yeah, and everybody does it. People who've been there for years do it, and I was blown away why the program is so meaningful to me. I didn't know what I was learning about myself when I did the Outward Bound trip, but it really impacted me, and I realized that every second of that you're out there in the wilderness, the instructors are watching everybody to look for ways to use nature to create something in a person. And that's where I met you. What is that?
Wow, that's a big question.
It's huge,
Andrew.
isn't it?
Yes. I'm curious to know what year you were up there in the winter, because I also instructed winter courses. But I think a piece of what it is, and I'm sure it's different for everybody, but I think a piece of what that is you don't even know that what you're about to do is possible for you. And so people are nervous, people are excited, people are in their bodies, they're using their minds. And so there's this real process of discovery. And the only way through it is to do it, right? And I think most people probably don't even realize it at the time, but they're changing as they go through that experience. And because it's like nothing that, it's a novel experience. It's nothing you've ever done before, more than likely, right? Mm-hmm. You've been challenged in different ways or whatever, but you've never been in this spot with these people in these conditions. And so there's a novelness to it, and there's a bit of like, I don't know how we're going to, move through this challenge, right? But I do know that I can do X, Y, and Z. I know that I have a trusting relationship with these people around me. I know I'm not in it by myself. There are instructors here that can support us. And so all I can do is put my best effort forth, and I can be in this place right now. I think that's the other thing. It really, experiences like Outward Bound, because there's a lot of really great experiences out there, but experiences like Outward Bound and experiential processes put you in a place of having to be and to be present. Mm-hmm. And you can't worry about anything else really, because it really requires pretty much your full attention, right? So
yeah, and it's such a metaphor to so many other parts of life. Like your Outward Bound experience is your introduction to realizing that you're capable of more than you knew you were capable of. But it applies to every stage where you have hardship in life.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. Excuse me. I do think that, again, experiences like Outward Bound are really great for those transition points in our lives. Times when we might be questioning ourselves, or times when we've just completed something and we're moving somewhere else, because it's often the time in between kind of significant stepping stones in our life where we find our strength, because we actually have to test it. And I think Outward Bound is one of those places. It can also be a great experience to pause too, right? Like, even though you're constantly doing things, it's this pause from what our regular life is. And I also think nature has something significant to do with Outward Bound. I think of nature as kind of the third instructor, right? You never know what's going to happen. And, you didn't know it was going to be 60 below zero, right?
Right, yeah.
But it teaches us certain things about ourselves. It teaches us about conditions that we need to be successful, conditions we need to be reflective, whatever it may be. But I think there's, you're right, there is a real opportunity when people are going through transition points. And that it might be a formal transition, or it, like, someone who just graduated high school and they're getting ready for college, or someone who's shifting from one job to another, or whatever it may be. But they also might be, you want to create a transition, right? And, oftentimes Outward Bound programs involve adolescence. And it's such a rich time to work with young people, because they are in the process of forming, right? And I think that's what's happening too in transition times. Like, there's this, something is forming within us. We might not be able to name it yet, or we might not even recognize that that's happening, but like clay is taking shape, right? The moist clay is taking a shape for us.
There's so much of adolescence, is forming. But a lot of people say, well, once you're a certain age, you can't change. And I don't agree with that at all. Your mentality may tell you you can't change, but there's always an opportunity to have drastic change if that's what you want.
Yeah.
And I think, and as I get older and I look at myself and other adults, I realize there's a lot of adolescent behavior that we're still carrying around with us that isn't serving us. And any time is a good time to look at that, look at yourself, and understand what you have control over. And that's one thing I learned is like, stop blaming people for, I mean, people may have impacted your life, but that doesn't mean anybody has to control your life. And one thing that controls a lot of people's lives, whether it's adolescents or adults, is media and social media and expectations and childhood and norms and society of not wanting people to become too big. It's like, keep yourself small and or do this, go on this path. And if you have this much IRA account at this age, you're doing great. And it doesn't matter whether you're growing personally, but a lot of people kind of suffer through life and are looking, they realize there's something in myself I don't fit with everybody else's expectations. And this type of inward look can really be a transition for people.
Yeah, I agree. I just want to take that in a bit because I think you're hitting on something really important. And, you know, I firmly believe that we're all in a process of becoming, right? And I think when we recognize that, we can open ourselves to the gifts, the experiences, the things that are around us that can teach us. And you're right. Like, the only thing that we can control is ourselves. You know, I can't control these dogs. I can't control anything that happens externally from me, but I can be really present and aware of what's happening for me internally and control that, right? Like, even emotions are information. But if we're hung up in feeling them rather than recognizing what they might mean or what they might be there to tell us, then we might miss that opportunity of transition or that opportunity of growth or that, like, oh, that aha moment. And, you know, like, that's why I have always been an educator, because I love those aha moments that people have when they're connecting dots for themselves, experiences that create meaning for themselves in life. So
How do you even approach somebody to tell them it's okay to have a transition, to look for, like, a lot of people, messages appear all over, but it doesn't mean anything unless you're looking for it in the first place or preparing yourself to receive it in the first place.
yeah.
Like that first step can be tricky and resistance. And with an instructional school like where we were with Outward Bound, they're there because they want that instruction. But other than that, what leads people to, and what can we do to help move them through some of these processes? I'm putting you on the spot.
No, it's good. I think there's, like, I'm a believer that we have this internal knowing, you know, and we know what feels right and what doesn't feel right. We know when something creates question for us or causes us to go like, oh, that wasn't what I was expecting. Or, wow, why have I been in this place that doesn't feel so natural for so long? Oh, maybe it has to do with like a values misalignment, or wow, I'm not actually able to meet my desires doing what I'm doing right now, or wow, this doesn't settle with my beliefs. And sometimes we need to experience that many times over.
Yeah.
Sometimes we need to experience it once, right? But I think it has something to do with how attuned somebody is into that experience for themselves. And sometimes it's really hard to let go, right? Like, how many people have stayed in relationships too long, or stayed in a job too long, or, even lived in a place they didn't enjoy very much, because they stayed because they knew it, right? And change is constant, but it's also hard. And that word of transition is scary because there's this like uncertainty that's can be connected to it. And I think, and this gets into a little bit of coaching stuff, but like, if we only think of transition as scary or hard or uncertain, then we're probably going to hold ourselves back from experiencing it or really stepping forward into it. But if we can think of that as, wow, and this is a gift, this is an opportunity, this is where I get to plug in my creativity, or I get to pay attention to my intuition. This is where I might experience joy or peace. Like, those are different thoughts than those of maybe anxiety or, fear around different things. So I think one of the things that helps people step into transition is, even if there's this much recognition of a small recognition of like, yeah, this actually could be really good. Like, there's probably something here for me.
Yeah.
Over the inner critic that we have of, well, I'm not ready for this, right?
A lot of what ifs. Well, what if this happens? What if this happens? And there's a learning process to realize, like, you're not there yet. And there is a choice you'll be able to make when you get there, and you'll be able to get through it. But it can be paralyzing for so many people who, when they can't see the future, they don't want to approach it.
Yeah. I'm really curious, what was the process that you went through to decide to do that Outward Bound experience? And what told you, yeah?
Just, I've always had this connection with nature, and this belief that you can do anything. And the depression I was feeling and the anxiety I was feeling was preventing me from doing things because I just physically couldn't. My mind wasn't working through it. And so, beyond exercise, sleep, and diet, and the first orientation was like within a week of taking some SSRIs, and I was like, holy shit, like, what am I going to do? Like, I realized that I need sleep. It's like, well, we're going to be up till midnight tonight, and taking off in the canoe the first thing in the morning at 4 hours later. I was like, can I handle this? And everybody was there saying, hey, we're here to help you through this. But the intellectual discussion was something that I needed in my life, and kind of like focusing on who I am as a person, and it was therapy for me. It was the best therapy I could get, because I was learning, as being encouraged to do things that were comfortable, and trusting my instructors, and it was, yeah, I'm talking about like when I started instructing there.
Mm-hmm.
And it gave me a chance to address a lot of questions that I wasn't able to address just a few months earlier, which was society told me I became a lawyer and I went to law school and I was reading 10,000 pages a month or maybe a week. I think 10,000 pages a week just to get through it, and got through it in 2.5 weeks and pushed myself and realized I didn't like it and I wasn't meeting my expectations of what society had. And I thought if I'm an attorney, I can be important and I can use my intellectual skills and I can walk into a room with a little bit of swagger, but it wasn't fulfilling for me. Earlier in my life, my older brother died, and it was had a lot of spiritual connections to things, and I knew something there was really important with nature, but I didn't know what. And it took um, being in a place where I knew I needed help to think, I didn't even know what outward bound why it was important to me. I just knew that, hey, I was really happy when I did this, so let me try it. And it turned out to be the best therapy I could ever have, because for me to learn how to teach other students, I had to learn to teach myself and look at myself. And it's never really scary going through this stuff, but we took classes in Zen, learning about like why worry about something when you don't know what impact it's going to have down the road. Is it good or is it bad? I have no idea. This tree fell down across my place where we're going to go canoeing through, and we had to change our plans, or everything got wet. Is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? I don't know. If our goal is to get from A to B, then maybe it's a bad thing. But if the goal is to have some bigger, fulfilling experience, adding a good or bad to it doesn't serve anything. And I even went further with my spiritual beliefs and started really exploring some different philosophies and realizing that life is so much easier when you don't try to be so attached to your final destination, and just to trust that life is going to guide you if you're open to those messages.
You're right on, and you're nailing a lot of things that I think are really important. Being able to make conscious choice. You talked about choice, and I think oftentimes we don't recognize the choices that we have, right? You talked about kind of fearlessness. You talked about, the what ifs and the good versus the bad, or, kind of trying to place judgment on things. And the past is gone. We can't do anything about it. And the future isn't here yet. We can prepare for it, and we can, do some planning and things like that. But ultimately, we don't. Tomorrow never comes because there's always another tomorrow, right?
Right.
So, what we have is where we are right now. You and I having this conversation, right? We have the present moment, and that is what we can affect. And when we are in a place of just exactly what you talked about, of letting go of judgment or fear, and allowing ourselves to be curious and trusting of ourselves, of the systems and people around us, that life is going to guide us, and it's going to offer us lessons and opportunities. And when we understand and sometimes we can't always see this, right? But if we can think about what's meaningful to us, and how do I want to be impacting people around me, the world, myself, if we can keep those things kind of centered for us, the little things aren't going to have a lot of power over us anymore to throw us off track. We all have experiences from when we were younger, from parents, teachers, siblings, other people around us, that were either embarrassing or they were hurtful or whatever. And so we naturally are creatures that do have judgments. We do have worries. All those things. So I'm not saying don't pay attention to those, but we want to recognize that when we're in that space of that detached involvement, like you talked about, like we can't control the outcome. So, we have to trust that any outcome that we get is going to be meaningful and help us in some way or help other people, right? And so when we can truly detach and trust ourselves, trust our faith, trust the systems around us, then we can be present and experience fully kind of what that transition is. So,
yeah, I think for me, I let go of my expectations for life and try to just, okay, so for Outward Bound, this wilderness school, above all else, what?
compassion.
Compassion, above all else. And that has the hugest impact when that's your goal in life, when that's your goal, canoeing and rock climbing and everything. It has profound abilities to recenter the focus and purpose on what you're doing, and things just happen better when everybody's operating together with that, because naturally dissonance evolves between people, and you have to remind them, and that's what causes problems in our expectations. And one,
Can I?
go ahead, yeah.
I think you're right on, and it's really important to include ourselves in that compassion circle.
Oh yeah.
Right. What speaks to you about that?
I want to talk about including myself in the compassion thing. One of the things that reminded me about trust in life, before I forget this, was rock climbing. And I was told to just lean back, and we were on the north shore of Lake Superior, and down below us, I don't know how high is, hundreds of feet, and
a couple hundred feet, yeah.
there's just water and jagged rocks. And it's like, okay, do I trust these instructors? Yes, they're as trained as you can possibly get. Do I trust the ropes? They're absolutely inspected every single time, and they always have the best climbing equipment possible. Do I trust the knots? They've tied it to, there's so much redundancy. Different people are inspecting everybody's knots. My knots, I know how to do it. I looked at it. I've had 2 people check them out. I am safer on that ledge over the water than I am driving out of the parking lot in the van.
That's correct.
And so logically, why would I be afraid? And I have to make a decision. Do I trust my environment and I'm willing to step into it, or do I have fears? And if I can name things I'm scared about, then, well, yeah, then maybe you shouldn't be doing it. If you're identifying things that are causing the fear, those are things to address. But there never is, because it was our helmets, everything was, there's never been an accident in that type of situation. It's like we've got you. And so that's kind of an analogy for the fear of trusting life as well. When you just give up your expectations of what you think your life is supposed to be like, and just trust that nothing can give you a better life than just the process
Yeah.
of life. And the more we try to control it, the better. And you asked me, I'm sorry.
You really resonated with a piece around
Compassion for ourselves.
compassion for yourself. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So often we get down on ourselves, and because of the problems we're facing, or this is my second time I'm down at ground zero, and I thought I was doing really good, and now look at me, I suck, because this is, the second, third time I keep falling back. But that's okay. And there's a philosophy that I like to think about that you can't really teach, but just sort of comes to you, is that you're exactly where you're supposed to be at every moment.
That's right. That's right. I love that. Yeah. My mom always said everything happens for a reason, right? And I think about that too. In those moments of, like, when you're talking about you're right on the edge of that cliff and you got to go down, right? Or you don't have to, but you may choose to. And you're going to be safe. But there's something at play, right? We have a logical mind, we have an emotional mind, and we have an intuitive mind. And usually for us, one of those things kind of dominates. And I think in that moment that you were explaining, that was probably a very powerful moment for you when you finally leaned over and you're like, oh, I got this, right? But when we're in different experiences, whether it's challenging or not, if we can invite our logical mind, our emotional mind, and our intuitive mind into a place together to say, wow, well, what does my logical mind tell me here? What does my intuitive mind tell me? And what's my emotional mind telling me? You're inviting yourself through a process of curiosity.
You're
to
mentioning
look at,
three very distinct things. I want to talk about what each of those purposes are, but there's another piece. It's the one that's analyzing those and choosing them. And we can talk about that as well. Like, what is that person, and how is that different from your intuitive and logical and
yeah,
emotional?
yeah. I think you use the analyzer to probably help blend all of those things ultimately. When I think about the intuitive mind, it's like, what is your higher coach, or what is your higher being? Like, what's instinctual to you? What's your gut? I think of it as like a higher coach, right? It's like,
Yeah.
boy, no limitations. This is what my instincts are telling me. And I trust my instincts. My logical brain is like, do I have $5,000 to pay for that? Well, maybe this isn't the right timing for that. It's like brings in other elements to the decision other than just that intuitive piece. I tend to be an intuitive decision maker. Sometimes it's helpful and sometimes it's not. But and then I think the emotional piece, again, in given situations, my emotions are super strong, and they can kick in fear for me, or they can kick in excitement. But it's usually I think my emotional, how I would define kind of our emotional self is like, I think emotions are triggered from past experiences. And so whether that emotion is happiness or fear or sadness or grief or whatever it may be, but there's something in there. And I think it's really important to dig deeper than just understanding that that's the emotion that's present, but understanding like what's the information that that's telling me, right? So I think when we blend those three together and then say, okay, now how do I move forward?
Because they may not be in agreement with each other.
Totally. Yeah. Yep.
So what do you do then?
Well, I can speak for me, but I'm curious what you do as well. That's when the analyzer comes in, right? And it's like, well, how is this informing the step that I want to take, the decision I want to make, how I want to show up for somebody or whatever the situation is. But, and it helps me go into a process of like really centering and aligning, like, oh, this is how this connects to either my beliefs or my values. Like, I mean, the reason I'm even got into this work, period, and Andrew, is because like I believe everybody has a birthright to believe in themselves, right? And so all the decisions I've made in my adult life generally align with all those things, whether it's recreational time or work time or personal time or whatever. But like, I want to always be contributing to that belief, right? And I've got certain values that I hold. And so I think when I use that process of thinking logically, emotionally, and intuitively, it really helps me move into a place of centering myself.
Right. And it's this part of you that I don't think we realize, choosing to use your logic and not use your logic. Choosing to look at your emotions and be aware of your intuition. And I think a lot of people aren't aware of their intuition because they aren't looking for it. But those are all your logic, your emotions, your intuitions. It's not you. They are tools that something has the ability to use. And that's, I think, the part of us that people don't realize. They inherently see themselves as their emotions. They see themselves as their logic. They see themselves as this. And there's something inherent, I think, in every single human being, which is this, like, what are you without all those things that you can identify? If you can name it, then it's that. If you can name it, it's what is left. And it's this alignment. You know, it's when everything is just flowing exactly the way and you aren't doing stuff. And so for me, when I've learned to look for cues for when I'm out of alignment. And I think that's an important thing to learn. One is our body, you know, your tension. Obviously, a doctor can tell you have your blood pressure is way too high. Do you have some stress in your life? It's like, now that you mention it, you know?
Yeah.
If you get hot, if I start swearing or yelling, it's a cue for me to say, okay, something's not in alignment here. And before I just jump in with my logic or emotions to try to solve it, I think the first step is to, especially if your emotions are really high, to just set the problem aside and just do whatever you do to center yourself. Maybe it's
breathe.
Pray, have a cup of tea, listen to some music, go on a walk, but get back to that spot. And that's where the clarity
Yeah.
comes in.
I I couldn't agree more. I think it's really important to hit the pause button. And you're right, like we feel it in our bodies somewhere, I have a tight neck and shoulder all, pretty consistently. It's like, oh, that's a signal, right?
Uh,
Let's pay attention to our bodies. So yeah, exactly right. And that's awareness. And when we act on awareness, we can give ourselves permission to like just accept where we are. Like let's not judge it. It's not good or bad. It's not right or wrong. It just is, and it's there. And what we can control is our response, right? It's like stress is on one end of a continuum, and engagement is on another end of a continuum. And it's a journey to get from stress to engagement. And you've already mentioned many different things. And I think that's what programs like Outward Bound help people do, right? Especially with that intentional reflection every night. It's like people are asked to offer an appreciation or take an ownership, right? And at first, people look at us like, what do you mean I got to appreciate something or someone from the day? It's not a normal, but by the end of their experience, oftentimes that's what they're going to miss the most, because those are moments of connection to themselves, but also to their peers and their surroundings. And I think that awareness helps us create that connection, right? So, and it brings us back into a place so that if the stress is kind of showing itself through emotion or whatever it may be, then we can like take a breath and pause and get back to something that's closer to center so that we can figure out how to engage.
and connecting with people, there's a normal connection that you see with transactions and even among good friends sometimes. But then there's a connection of a deep, empathetic, caring connection, which requires you not to bring in expectations or goals or how people are just being. I want to say being yourself because that's so cliche, but just being.
Yeah, it brings me back to compassion,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
Like do unto others.
Yeah, and if you're really just there to make somebody feel good and try to help them and try to get to know them, the only way to do that is not to bring in everything that I need to act tough in this situation, or I need to act really cool, or I'm kind of scared. I don't want to bring in this. Just it doesn't matter. Just just really just caring about somebody else is a way to really connect with somebody. And then when people are connecting that way, that's where the real magic happens.
Yeah. Yeah. If you remember, Outward Bound has 3 kind of steps in their course progression, like training phase, which is
Yeah.
I call it learning. Then there's main phase, which I call leadership, because the students are taking on more leadership and leadership of themselves, of their peer group, and their experience. And then there's final expedition, or what I call responsibility. And when you gain more responsibility, you also gain more independence, right? But it takes that connection to be formed and to really be something that people can lean into for that responsibility and independence, for that final expedition where the students are really in control of their course and in control of the experience. Obviously, the instructors are there for safety and things like that, but that's like a really powerful time in an outward bound experience, because you're getting to really utilize, be tested, whatever it is, but really step into the skills and the confidence and the relationships that have built this community that now can, like, I mean, some groups paddle 30 miles in a day or whatever it is, right? But could be a really long portage, or could be, boy, somebody got injured and they figured out how to support that person in a way. And so that, that connection is important.
Whenever I look at the world and or the country's perception of what our responsibility is versus that country or our city, or that's, I think about it like an expedition. Nobody's going to tell you you can't eat fish tonight because you didn't catch any. Nobody's going to tell you, tough, you got a sore foot, so you got to still carry those extra backpacks. People see the needs of the group, and there's this group mentality, and people step up and do extra work. If somebody, you have to trust that people aren't going to just sit and take advantage of the fact of everybody's goodwill. Everybody's really contributing what they can. Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing you mentioned, and I'm really curious, is this concept of independence versus part of the group.
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately, at the very end, are we a collective group, or are we, like, yourself is really what this is all about? That's
a
really
great question. I think it's likely different for every person, but I think there's you cannot do it without your peer group, right? And just like I can't exist in this world without my people, my family, my friends, my neighbors. This winter when everything was really chaotic here in the Twin Cities with Metro Surge and everything. A nice text from my neighbors saying, "Hey, let's share a meal together," because I think one of the things that we can do to shift the energy is just be neighbors, just be good neighbors. And that led to all sorts of other opportunities to give to communities that were really impacted by all of that. And I think it's in the small acts that we do create that collective. At the end of the day, we leave outward bound and we go into another community. And so you're never going to not care. You're always going to carry that experience, like you've talked about, forward. And as a result, you're carrying your peers, your colleagues from your Outward Bound course with you as well. Because you wouldn't have changed, you wouldn't have learned, you wouldn't have shifted in the way that you shifted without each person, without each moment, without the landscape, all those things. And so truly you're carrying those things forward as you truly go outward bound back into whatever your life is back at home. And you're different. You've moved through that transition, right? And now you're in this process of trying to understand what is this new definition of me, or what is this place that I am on this path of becoming? What does it mean right now? And how do I want it to support me, right?
I'm really glad I asked you that question. I didn't know what I was going to get or what my ideas were, but do you remember the TV show Grizzly Adams?
Yeah.
And
we're aging ourselves, Andy.
I know. Okay, so for all you kids out there, back in the 70s, there's a show about a mountain man, basically, and he had a bear. And So yeah, companionship there, but he lived a lot by himself. But I suppose if I look back at it, he's always going to be interacting with people. And I always thought to myself, I would be completely happy just having a hut on a mountain and spending most of my day just interacting with nature. But that's not how we live. And it's also not part of the human experience. Like, I think there's something inherent about being human. There's other people, and if we try to say, I don't need that, we tend to hurt ourselves somehow. There's so much that we can do on our own, and that we don't need the permission and acceptance of everybody on every step. But we still need to practice compassion for people. And if you're feeling those tensions and something's not right, there's so many little things that help, like breathing, having gratitude about your day, but also just doing something for somebody else. It's something you can do right now that will set you on a path of transition.
Yeah. Yeah. I just listened to Brene Brown's Dare to Lead book again. And she talks about courage a lot in that book. And I think it's the courage to create the connection, right? Like, she also talks about rumbling in there. Like, she talks about this experience of her team coming forward and saying, we got to rumble about how you perceive the length of time that it takes to do these projects, or whatever it was. But what it created was an opportunity for her team to be courageous and for her to be vulnerable and receive, but also participate in that process of connection, because they were really all trying to do and work towards the same end, or a similar end anyway. And I think that it does take courage to support someone, to raise a question that might not be comfortable. And
people are afraid of looking dumb, and it always goes back to something in their past.
yeah,
And it's not, there's no truth in that. It's just an experience, and you're vulnerable and you reacted, and it's stuck with you.
yeah, yeah. I call that little T truths, because of those experiences that we've had in our lives where it's like, oh, that wasn't comfortable, I'm not going to do that again. Or like, oh, boy, I was told I was too short to play basketball. I'm too short to play basketball. Now that's a limiting belief for me, right? And so we create these little T truths that we think are true for ourselves. And they can put us in a place of creating rules or parameters, or really holding us back, right? But when we recognize that, it's like, well, there's some more capital T truths that are more universal truths, like anybody can play basketball. It doesn't matter if you made a team or not. You can play basketball.
Right. If your goal is I want to play in the NBA, well, then that's you getting in front of what's the right thing for your life. And like, I'm not going to be happy if I don't achieve this.
Yeah.
No matter what it is, even if things that you're completely capable of achieving, if that's what you're placing your happiness on, is achieving that, that's
yeah, you can't control the outcome, right?
No. That's one thing about life, is there's always going to be change in something.
Which is why it's so important to practice what you talked about earlier, and that's like this process of detached involvement, right? It's like, just be in the moment. Don't be connected to a specific outcome. I mean, it's important to have goals and know where you're headed,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you can't place your sense of self and your sense of value
Right.
in those outcomes.
Right. And that sense of self is kind of what so many people are struggling with today is they identify themselves as things they've accomplished. I'm a school teacher, I'm a parent, I'm this. All of those things can change, and then what?
Yeah.
You know, what is it that's constant? That's the timeless that we're looking at. What is it that's always there for you? And like,
Yeah.
and you just kind of have to work yourself through it and take those steps and be courageous enough. And having people like you on here of saying, just take that first step and start looking a little bit.
Yeah. True. Very true. And, you know, ultimately it comes back to something else you mentioned. It's like knowing our who, like who we are, not necessarily what we are. Who am I? I'm a compassionate person. Who am I? I'm a person that believes. Who am I? I have integrity. You know, like those things are things that
Right. Yeah.
we can
yeah.
control, right?
Those values
yeah,
aspects of it.
yeah, yeah. You know, I'm a lover of the environment. Okay, great. Like thinking about your who, not your what and not your how. Those things are important, but it's almost sometimes I think we say what we are. We're a teacher or we're a whatever, a financial person or whatever we are, because it's an easy way to explain by what we do rather than who we are, right?
I love that. I love that. I think this is where we're going to stop for today. And always talking to you is like so enriching. It just supports me listening to you. So thanks
Likewise.
so much for talking to me today.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Andy. I really appreciate it. It was so nice to get the email and the request to be part of this. And our time at Outward Bound together was memorable for me as well. And it's just so nice to reconnect and be able to connect through something like this. So thank you.
You're welcome. If you enjoyed this episode and you know somebody that might be inspired by it, share it with them. To learn more about the show, go to chasingthetimeless.com.